A very good morning to you all. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain Oso.
It's a brand new day. Good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Makide.
It's the 1st of June and we're grateful to be here. Good morning. I am Bukola Samuel Webimo.
That's actually a very important thing to mention.
Yes, indeed.
What is the first day of
the
last month in the first half of 2022?
Whatever that means.
The 6th month, not the last month.
The first day in the last month in the first year, in the first half of the year. Come on.
It's the 1st of June, guys. Well, you know, but it turns out that, yes, you have to look out. There's been that talk about Lagos. Okay, well, pardon us. Magwe is also here. Good morning, Magwe.
I was just wondering, was it because my partner just left me? I'm about to be abandoned? Oh, well, good morning. Welcome to Abuja. I'm Magwe Yusuf.
You know how it goes in this profession. It's the voice of Esau, hand of Jacob. So, you know how we roll. So, but yeah, you have to look at in Lagos, they have placed a total ban of commercial motorcycles to 6 local government areas. So, it did raise some apprehension because there was some information that was circulating in different places as to what was going to happen, how certain of those who have been banned from riding those motorcycles in those local governments were quote-unquote threatening certain things. But the Commissioner of Police in Lagos has equally spoken, saying, look, no such thing. And so the police are all out there trying to ensure that things go normally. So, but we'll focus on that, hopefully, as we do progress. I mean, you've seen several reports about all of those things in terms of what to do, why that happened, and so who knows if there's going to be an outright ban in the entire local government in Lagos. Who knows?
Well, that's one of the things that actually gives one concern about that one is that, okay, so there's a talk.
Yeah.
And it's not the first time we're hearing of it. Now, whether or not, how sustainable this one would be, I guess we'll find out in the coming days. And of course,
if it was sustained in other states, why can't it be sustained here?
I guess we'll wait to see.
Did you hear what I don't know if it's the ACF that said some of them are Nigerians, Chadians.
I understand that. Look, we've been trying to ban Okada since 2006 in Lagos. Every governor that has governed Lagos has banned Okada one way or the other, and they are still as they are. So that's not where I'm going, actually. So one of the things that have been responsible all over the nation for people raising concerns about Okada is their use for other nefarious activities. Remember the number of kidnappings that many people said that Okadas were used to perpetrate in this country. That's something that gives anyone concern. So, talking about kidnapping, remember this recently released a clergyman. So one is wondering, there are too many issues to raise on that one. I don't even know where to begin.
Well, it gives one serious cause for concern, serious cause for worry. And Marco was saying earlier on before we started off the program that it so happens that prior to this time, security agencies would deny that ransom was paid. But this is someone who has come out to brief the press after his ordeal to say that indeed we paid ransom. And that's a whopping 100 million naira. At every point, whether it's through direct combat or through soft approach, it seems as if we're feeding the demon of insurgency in this country. And to what end? The insurgents, the bandits just become more monstrous, and there are options that can be deployed to tackling it. We only hope that government will have the willpower, to deploy those options to tackling the insurgency.
100 million is not a joke.
Well,
people have worked 30 years. They retired. They didn't get 100 million.
Did you hear the prelate?
I wish we will have time to really listen to what the clergyman said himself. And, well, first of all, maybe we should take...
What's the bank balance of the Methodist Church of Nigeria?
We're coming to that. It's very, very sad. Very, very sad and painful. So, but, Mark, what's your take on all of this, first of all?
Well, you know, I think that it's very important to underscore the person who was kidnapped. I mean, as Bukola was trying to say, he's a clergyman, quite all right, but he also heads the Methodist Church here in Nigeria. The prelate of the Methodist Church was kidnapped. That's at least in, I'm trying to see how I can compare this for people to understand the magnitude of that. Well, let me not look for any comparison. The one that easily comes to my mind is maybe is exaggerating a little, but imagine that the Pope of the Catholic Church, you know, were kidnapped, something that grievous. That's who was kidnapped in Nigeria. The head of the Methodist Church was kidnapped, and he went through quite an ordeal. You can see his eyes reddened, one of his eyes reddened, and he talked about how he was beaten so badly that, you know, there was a lot of blood coming out from that eye. In recent times, there have been targeted attacks at clergymen. Do not forget that was it last week or 2 weeks ago, we saw the kidnap of priests in Kebbi State. We've not been told that those priests have been returned. In Kaduna State, we saw a few priests kidnapped. One of them died in the custody of the kidnappers. On and on, it's gone. It's really terrible. I mean, talking about kidnapping in general, do not forget those who were kidnapped along the Kaduna-Abuja train who have yet to be returned. In fact, there is a threat, an ultimatum hanging on their necks. They've made several appeals to the government of the day. So this is really getting out of hand. We've also been told about an unknown number of people who were kidnapped just traveling. Ever since the train has stopped working, people have had to brave the journey by road. You know, people who were taken on the roads as well. So we have a number of people who have been kidnapped in different parts of the country, and you know, there's no word in them. Don't forget that this is all happening at a time when there was conversation around whether or not ransom paying should be criminalized. Even though that the conversation around there, I mean, where the conversation was stemming from, there have been strong denials. Nonetheless, it went round that there were conversations around how, you know, paying of ransom be criminalized. But when you think about the agony, you could see the prelate's wife there, I mean, hugging her husband. The relief that would have flooded her. I mean, just seeing him alive, hale and hearty. Men are usually not people to show emotion, but even he too couldn't help himself. And I'm sure he decided to bear it all so that people will understand that we are in trouble. We truly are in trouble. We cannot travel freely anymore without fear of being kidnapped. 100 million, how many people can raise that, you know, in a matter of days? I don't know. This is something that really needs to be taken very seriously. We all listen to his briefing. We've had these kinds of briefings in private. It's just that this is the first time I have seen it. Okay, well, maybe not the first time. We saw that of Mr. Mike Ozekome, SAN, who was in detention with kidnappers for weeks almost. But this is the second one we're getting this clearly, admitting very candidly that a ransom of 100 million naira was paid. We need to do something. If we say we're not going to pay ransom, then we need to up the ante in terms of being able to catch these people and rescue our people from the jaws of wicked kidnappers. Gentlemen.
Guys, I don't know if it's me. Has the police said anything about this?
I guess we wait.
We wait. Wow. We wait. Because, I mean, why will these kind of things not make people think about doing whatever they can to protect themselves, including getting a gun? Well, yes. What do you expect people to do? You know, if they see 7 persons and suspect maybe this chap could have 100 million, they kidnap the person and the person has no such thing near it, who knows what might happen next?
What's troubling for me, Chamberlain, is that these are the reports that we have and can get.
Yep.
How about the families in very many areas in Nigeria today who are at this very moment going through this agony?
And nothing's been heard of that.
And no one knows that such a thing is happening to them. Those people are in captivity. And you said something about being underreported the other time before we came back on air. Largely underreported. So we have intelligence, we know that these things happen, and then there is that law that Malcolm referenced, the terrorism prevention bill amended to criminalize ransom payment. In this regard, what would you have done, even though you were part of making that law?
Well, and don't forget that, you know, when we also talk about the ban on Okada, there's also the concern that these people who have been put out of, you know, their jobs, so who migrate to other, they have two options now: migrate to other local governments where the ban has not been effected, or resort to crime. That is a very real problem staring.
Well, there is that because they know the police seems overwhelmed in some of these cases. And so if this caliber of people can be kidnapped, 100 million paid, and then who knows what the police, maybe the police is angry. Why did you go and say you paid 100 million? Who knows?
I guess we'll wait.
Now you see clerics, if they start getting bodyguards, people arming them, you may not have to see the reason why. But look, you could go on and on about some of these things. But what options do the police have, you know? There's also the problem of investigation. The police does not have the capacity for investigation. That's the problem staring crime fighting in the face.
The Constitution says the responsibility of government is to protect lives and property. How that gets done is the reason they took the job. So if they don't have capacity, why don't they have capacity? So if they identify why, what are we doing to address it? Because we keep playing the ostrich here. We don't want to address the structure of the policing. We say, oh, no, it's okay. But look at what's going on. Look, guys, let's start with the dailies, look, so that you don't just give so many people a lot of heartache this morning. As quick as we can, New Telegraph first. They focus on politics this time around, oh, yeah. And who knows, part of the questions we will keep asking politicians will also be on security. But look at how New Telegraph reports today. 2023, allow me... That song is playing. No, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that song in my head just now. It's... No, there is no enjoyment in that one. So if that's what you're thinking.
Allow me choose my successor. Buhari urges APC governors. Vows to provide stronger leadership for increased electoral fortunes as party settles for northern candidate to tackle PDP. Did I just read that?
Oh, well, you just did.
Okay. Party's NWC members may challenge Adamu's leadership style in courts. And then you see PDP primary, why Bala Mohammed didn't step down for Atiku. So they highlight all of that there. So don't forget that part. Party settles for northern candidates to tackle PDP. So both parties will have northern candidates. Watch this space.
Really? Okay. Closely related to that, Chamberlain, is the Daily Trust newspapers, which also leads thus: Buhari woos APC governors over choice of successor. Well, the writers, let's see what they say. Move not president's agenda. Sources: why he allows many contenders to compete. That's attributed to Yerima. And president can't force own choice on Nigerians. CSOs. Well, that's the Daily Trust and the big headline there. Let's move to the bottom corner of the Daily Trust, which is closely related to what we started with. Two Zamfara banditry kingpins, others killed in rival clash. 30 vigilantes feared killed. That is really worrisome. It gives cause for concern, and something must be done about it. 30 vigilantes feared killed. Just one more before we exit the Daily Trust. Tambuwal moves to run for Senate after stepping down for Atiku. Watch that space.
They just keep circulating themselves. Do you see how their children were also winning elections? And you ask yourself, well, their children not that popular?
Chamberlain, we're not going to leave if you start on that one.
Don't even go there. Don't even go there.
Did anybody even know any of those who have won those elections?
I was driving past yesterday and I saw a poster of a late clergyman's favorite child or grandchild. So please don't even go there. Nigerian News Direct this morning has this one on its front page. It's another angle to the same story that the New Telegraph and the Daily Trust has highlighted, but that's it. Consensus plan, shock, as Buhari begs governors to pick preferred presidential candidate. Well, I don't know.
Is it a consensus? Okay, well, that's what News Direct likes us to believe.
Exactly.
It's a consensus plan. Well, New Telegraph, also says, as party settles for northern candidate to tackle PDP. So they're all agreeing.
As soon as news came out yesterday about the president meeting with the governors, I knew
something was coming, huh?
I knew that the papers were going to milk it in different ways.
Of course. Well, the writers say Tinubu unstoppable in the APC presidential politics, says Baroge. President has told us his ideal successor, okay? Subscribe to Governor Sule. Adamu gagging, blackmailing us in Buhari's name. NWC's members cry out.
Really?
Find the details of that on page 2 of the paper this morning. Well, that's what's on the front page of the paper today. And so many other stories you can find interesting on the front page of the paper this morning.
I wonder what Mapua is hearing behind the scenes if all these things. She's in Abuja. That's
especially because she's in Abuja, right?
You never know.
Well, Abuja.
Mapua.
Well, Abuja, what are you hearing? Sorry, Mapua, what are you hearing?
Oh, I do not know what you mean by that. Right now, my ears hear no evil, they see no evil.
Oh, come on, be our fly on the wall.
Well,
you're close to the
they hear
villa,
quite a bit. But you know, politicians, they're eternally optimistic that if this is going to be consensus, then they must be the choice of the president. We don't know how that's going to work out, but this is how Vanguard newspaper captures that particular story. Buhari's sucker punch to APC governors. I'll pick my successor. Bukola, you're indeed right. Different interpretations to the particular statement. Says governors were given re-election tickets or allowed to choose their successors. Adds, we must choose someone that will give us victory. President jets to Spain with governors, ministers to perfect plan. Parties candidates may come through consensus. 23 aspirants to be pruned to 4, 1 from north, 3 from south. Buhari's 12-point speech that jolted APC governors. Jonathan's fate sealed as Okorocha's hang in the balance. Don't forget that yesterday he made it out of the custody of the EFCC to go for his screening. You also have, I mean, they're showing you pictures of one of the presidential aspirants at that screening yesterday. But look at this, APC crisis. We've become redundant. NWC members cry out. Excuse me. Tekan Ekwa gives federal government 7 days, I believe, to arrest Islamic cleric inciting religious crisis in Taraba. Page 13 has details there. And just on top of the nameplate, look at this. Kidnap saga, they showed me decomposed corpse when I negotiated 10 million naira. That's from the Methodist prelate. Confirms 100 million naira ransom paid. So that story is also on the front page. If you flip to the back page of the Vanguard, there's Vanguard Sports. Pesero pushes us a lot. Our ZM gives verdict on new coach. So it looks like the new coach has resumed and he's doing what he needs to do. Mr. and Mrs. is still on the front page for you. Should I take it? Should I not? Well, listen to what Mrs. says. She says some of them said they prefer women with the shapes of small letter B or P, and others preferred the ones with figure 8. If your friends are not good for nothing womanizers, what a day. And Mr. has this lovely retort. Well-lettered men with figurative or with sound figurative expressions. So, beat that for literature. Let's leave it there for Vanguard newspapers.
What class is that again? Literature? Okay. Look at leadership newspapers, guys. In final push, but Ayo, stop distracting me. I'm trying to focus. Can somebody help me? I need help. Help from Ayo. Leadership newspapers.
You're well lettered yourself. The letters are.
In final push for consensus, PMB says, I will choose my successor. So that's a big deed right there. Look at this right there. Let me just take one of them. Asks progressive governors to support the, quote, anointed one. So, you know what to expect. And you know, if you look at that statement, he proceeded and laid out the grounds. The returning governors have been allowed free tickets. Those who are leaving, the governors now, have been allowed to choose their successor. So he said to those governors on both ends. And now he says, look, now it's my turn. Allow me. No, it's this paper. Okay, that's leadership today.
Well, you'll enjoy yourself later, Timberlake.
Well,
Relax.
Timberlake, that's a very good way to look at it, and I'm interested in knowing the response of our resource persons this morning to how you have couched it, you know, so succinctly. I'm looking forward to that. Let's go to the Guardian newspapers, and it looks at this big story from a slightly different perspective. It says, Buhari's choice of presidential candidate unsettles APC governors. So has the president made his choice already?
Well, it appears so, because how are they unsettled now? When they allow them to return free ticket unopposed, when they allow them to choose a successor, why weren't they unsettled at that time?
Malcolm, you're going to have to help us again. Please keep your ears close to the ground, perhaps before the end of the program.
But you know, there are those governors who are not returning and who...
They chose their successor.
Chose their successors, but they also chose other things. Those who are going to the National Assembly and all of that.
Yeah, they'll go there, but then choose your successor. 2 for the price of 1. And guys, we call it a democracy, right? Don't we? We still call it a democracy?
Guys, forgive me, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around...
don't try too hard.
The proprietary of, I mean, you govern the whole state. Now you govern just 1/3 of that state in the National Assembly. I don't know.
When you get into politics, you
I may sound like a broken record, but who wants to make 100 million naira investment and lose at the end of the day?
Nobody.
And the bandits are not losing.
Okay. All right, let's finish off with the Guardian newspapers. Let's see what the writers are saying about the big story. President seeks to take charge in selecting party's flag bearer, jets off to Spain. Governors begin deliberation after meeting Buhari. Lawan okays Buhari's choice of candidate. Osinbajo has all it takes to succeed, Buhari, says Ojudu. And lastly, crisis deepens as key NWC members threaten to reject the party's decision on flag bearer others. The crisis may be deeper than we thought. But before we exit the Guardian newspapers, let's look at one more big political story, and that's at the top corner of the Guardian. Fresh hurdles for Atiku as suit seeks disqualification, queries citizenship. That's it from the Guardian.
The Daily Times newspaper is talking about the same story. Of course, as Bukola said earlier, a different angle altogether. 2023, conditions APC presidential candidate must meet by Buhari. Find the details there. Seek support of APC governors to pick a successor. Stories on page 2. But right above that story is this troubling one. 2023, about 20 million PVCs uncollected. INEC laments.
They will ship ground afterwards. INEC. Isn't INEC? Yeah. Remember they said they were not going to allow no more shifting date for what? The primaries, right?
Yes.
But they did after all.
No, they didn't shift the date. It's just... They
give them more extent. They shifted grams.
But that June 12 is... June 10 is still sacrosanct.
For the parties, the political parties.
Yes. They have to upload all of their primaries,
yeah, but
candidates.
they said they were not going to give them that
But there was
time.
some form of concession, however minimum that concession was. Yeah.
Well, so I remember they said, well, if you give politicians an inch, they will take a mile.
Yeah.
So you've done it before, you can do it again.
Absolutely. That's what civil society is saying.
But is that does that justify people not collecting their PVCs? Anyway?
Of course not.
So anyway, so if you don't have your PVC, how are you going to vote? You know, go get your PVC. We've been shouting this almost hoarse, because if you don't get your PVC, what you get is what you get. It's unfortunately that's just the way it is. There's so many other stories on the front page. Apc crisis. Adamu working alone made NWC standing mirror. I subscribe to the national vice chairman of the party. That's the Daily Times newspaper this morning.
So don't forget, get your PVC so you can help those who had the PVC and didn't get what they wanted. So maybe if you join the fray, you could help tilt the balance. You never know. Well, don't forget to send us your comments on whatever you might have heard, the Daily's report this morning. But in case you're still waiting, don't worry, just hang on. There's more, way much more, coming up in just a moment. Stay with us.
Former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Dimeji Bankole, is the first to arrive on the second day of the screening of presidential aspirants under the ruling All Progressives Congress, APC. Shortly after, several other aspirants followed, including the Vice President, Professor Yemi Oshibajo. Done with the exercise, the Vice President throws some light into the interview process, dismissing a possible threat to his party following the emergence of former Vice President Alhaji Atiku Abubakar as the candidate of the People's Democratic Party, the PDP.
The screening went very well indeed. So we were able to discuss several issues of national and party concerns, and it went very well indeed. We had a very good chat.
What chances are for the APC in this race, considering an article of a PDP candidate?
Well, of course, way ahead of any party. Way ahead.
Some of the aspirants also speak on their experience during the screening process.
I think it's quite rigorous, and the checklist is very good, at least to be able to get to know the aspirants in totality and also get their idea of how they are going to run the affairs of the country so that we can further impact much more positively and take the country from the present level to the next level.
The chances is for also the APC to go to the north. You see, politics is about election. You have to look at the voting strengths. You see, I'm sure very soon, when Nigerians believe in Nigeria, accept citizenship as the as the criteria for choosing anything, like the Constitution has already decided, that there's nothing like zoning.
However, others are concerned that the primary may be monetized.
A situation will come where you have no business to build a project or do any major project, because basically it is not a basis for your re-election or indeed an election in the first instance. What matters is accumulate cash and buy delegates. It's a horrible trend. Nigeria cannot lead Africa in that direction, and this has to change.
Also screened today is the chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum, Governor Kayode Fayemi of Ekiti State, Governor Yahaya Bello of Kogi State, President of the Senate, Senator Ahmed Lawan, former Minister of Science and Technology, Dr. Ogbonaya Onu, and businessman, Mr. Tain Jack Rich. Only one aspirant, Senator Rochas Okorocha, remains to be screened by the committee ahead of the party's presidential primary next week.
Well, yes, it was much later that Senator Rochas Okorocha also made it just in the nick of time. He beat the deadline, and there you go. Remember, he had some ordeal with the EFCC. The court at that time had he was granted bail. So, as you saw there, he made that deadline, and then he was screened. So they seem all ready for the next stage. He thinks that with the support, he will be able to scale through. They all think they will scale through. That always happens. So they have unique kind of faith.
Yeah.
They have political faith.
You have heard what Mark said the other time. Politicians are the most optimistic set of people in the universe. So, yeah. Anyway, the conversation is about to start.
Oh, yeah. So we're going to, of course, go back to Abuja. We've got our guests just sitting there. I know there's so many perspectives, so many questions. Many want to hear their response to all of what may be making the rounds. Who knows? Mark,
I'm not here.
Well, thank you, Chamberlain. Indeed, I have with me two fantastic people here in the studio. Mr. Adebayo Shitu is a former Minister of Communications. He's a member of the All Progressives Congress as well. And he's an elected delegate who's prepped already to vote in the upcoming APC convention for his presidential primaries. You're welcome, former Honorable Minister.
It's my pleasure to be here again.
And we also have with us Mr. Sani Umar, who is former spokesman of the Presidential Campaign Council of the People's Democratic Party. You're welcome as well.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, thank you.
It's another presidential season. I don't know.
Exactly.
Will you be joining the Presidential Campaign Council of the PDP?
Well, I don't know. They have to the cycle starts with a selection process in the party.
Okay.
So if the party selects me, I will of course be a part of it.
Okay. Okay, well, let us look at the issues at hand right now, because a lot of things have been said from, as politicians like to say, they say an hour is like a lifetime in politics, and a lot can happen. The APC was busy conducting these presidential primaries. All of a sudden, we heard that the president was going to be meeting with APC governors. Before now, there had been speculation that the party might go the route of consensus. It's not yet clear. But immediately that meeting was called yesterday, it seemed rather clear that indeed it looks like consensus was going to be the route that the APC was going to go through. Even now, though, it's still not clear. But the message which the president sent to the governors was quite telling. I do not know if you've had a chance to read that statement. Have you, from our Honorable Minister?
I read the statement.
You did?
Yes, I read the statement.
What meaning did you get from it?
Well, the meaning I got from it is that the president, like every human being, would have his interests and preferences. And he tried to perhaps persuade, the governors to, perhaps allow him to make a choice, from among the aspirants.
Is that what he was saying?
Well, there are different reports, actually. Some reports...
Yeah, but it's one statement we all read.
Well, there were
Unless there were different kinds of statements.
There were two statements, but clearly he didn't mention any, specific person. But there was a report to the fact that since governors had always had the opportunity of, bringing in their preferred successors, there was that report, But I am happy that the president did not clearly try to impose any candidate, because, you see, I always say this, APC is said to be a progressive party. Progressive parties must not be afraid of primary elections. We must always ensure that a level playing field is provided for all aspirants from all over the country. That in itself has the capability or the potentiality of giving people a sense of belonging. Over the last 1 or 2 years, we've had challenges really about people thinking that some people are getting better advantages than others. And in our actions and in our statements, we must ensure that wrong impression or negative impression, is neutralized. So for me, I would appeal to Mr. President and appeal to our governors that they should, as Democrats, as progressives, ensure that a level playing field is provided for all candidates. Let delegates from the nooks and crannies of this country have an opportunity to make their choices. And then Nigerians will see that, we are doing better, than many other parties, as far as I'm concerned. So
I'd like to take some of the president's statement, some parts of his statement now, because he talks about how as he begins in number 5 of the statement, he says, as I begin the final year of my second term as president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and leader of the party, I recognize the compelling need for me to provide stronger leadership to the party under this transition process and to ensure that it happens in an orderly manner. He also talked about how in pursuit of the foregoing objectives, the party has successfully established internal policies that promote continuity and smooth succession plans, even at the state and local government levels. For example, first-term governors who have served credibly well have been encouraged to stand for re-election. Similarly, second-term governors have been accorded the privilege of promoting successors that are capable of driving their visions as well as the ideals of the party. He also talked about in number 10, I mean, that's reading from 5 to 7. Now, it looks like I'm reading Holy Scripture. When I'm talking about verses, looking at number 10 now, he says, in keeping with established internal policies of the party and as we approach the convention in a few days, therefore, I wish to solicit the reciprocity and support of the governors and other stakeholders in picking my successor, who would fly the flag of our party for election into the office of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria in 2023. It hasn't quite said. I mean, he said he would like reciprocity. Does it say to you very clearly that I have allowed you pick your own successors, allow me pick mine? Is that what he's saying?
Well, that's the impression being created by that statement. But we just need to remind ourselves that we have had several states in the past where governors attempted to bring in their preferred candidates over and above what is equitable, and it has backfired. You know, so it's not a standard that we must, you know, try to build on. You know, we are a democratic party. We should, to the best of my own you know, knowledge and you know, goodwill, I think that the fact that some governors have in the past imposed candidates cannot be a justification for us to continue to perpetuate that anti-democratic.
He didn't say impose. He said they were allowed to promote.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
people
I mean,
who are
look,
allowed,
everybody
who will drive their vision.
Yes, I mean, governors may have their preferences, but they should not, you know, bamboozle people. They should not intimidate. They should not do anything that will compromise the rights to fairness in, you know, bringing in new aspirants or candidates.
Okay. Yeah. Let me come to you, Mr. Sani. I'm sure that, maybe your party will be grateful for the fact that it didn't have to deal with this. I mean, oftentimes, looks like when you're at the center, it can be an advantage. It can also be a disadvantage.
Certainly.
But in this case, how did your party view the fact that you didn't have the president in your party? At least when it comes to this kind of situation, do you think that it's a major advantage or it's a disadvantage in terms of the process?
Well, I think it's an advantage to us at the moment. Not that we don't want to have the president, but as it is now, it has given us the opportunity to promote internal democracy, which we have successfully done, even though the absence of a president has denied us the chance to have, you know, full delegates, both statutory and elected delegates. So if we had had a president, the president would have signed the law to have made it, you know, an act for us to now operate with both statutory, but even with the limitations of the delegates, I think.
Did you lose anything by that, by not having statutory delegates?
Yes, because the number of delegates will have increased and the competition will have also increased for getting the delegates. And so the money politics that was alleged to have been happening will have reduced, because the more the number, you know, it becomes very difficult for huge spending. You know, so because of the limited number of delegates, the clamor and the quest to get more delegates on the side, you know, have led to, you know, allegations of huge spending.
But the 2019 elections did not have this encumbrance. Still, there were allegations of huge spending, weren't there?
Which elections are you?
The 2019 elections.
Yes.
Your convention, which happened in Port Harcourt prior to the 2019 elections, did not have this encumbrance, yes, where there were no statutory delegates.
There was no huge spending. In Port Harcourt, most of the people who were said to have even given delegates money was between $2,500 to $3,000. Now, the allegation is about $20,000, $30,000 per delegate. So the spending, this limit is higher Now, even though
because there are fewer delegates.
Yeah, there are fewer delegates, but the money given out is much more higher than the one in the totality of the Port Harcourt Convention.
You have that on authority?
Yes, I do. I was part of the process.
So are people complaining because they were left out of the bazaar?
Well, perhaps. I don't know whether it was a bazaar, but all I know is that the process was not as expected, because most people had been ready and they were sure that the number of delegates would have been higher. But they were disappointed when that omission by the National Assembly, came into play. And of course, you can't blame the president for not signing, because he has a window. The window is that he has within 30 days within which to sign the law. And of course, he has to scrutinize the law to ensure that the law is in complete compliance with his own dictates. Because the last time he signed that law, he discovered there was some encumbrances, and he begged the National Assembly to make some amendments, and they refused because they had already gotten what they wanted. And then they said he should go to court. So this time around, he has the right to look at it properly before he signs. So I'm not shifting blame to the president. What I'm saying is that we had already budgeted, we had already planned, all the delegates had campaigned along the line of both statutory and elective delegates.
Let me flip this to Lagos now, gentlemen and lady.
Well, yeah, Mr. Shitu, if I could ask you, when that part of the president's comment, which Mark read, also included the president say, look, allow me to do certain things. He read out those policies, but it came across as though you didn't agree with those provisions which it was read out. But what if, having spoken to the governors, and the governors feel, okay, Mr. President, all right, we agree with you, come up with what your suggestion is, then the leadership of the party agrees with the president, and they choose, then get to the larger party, and then they ratify by way of consensus or something. Will that be acceptable? Do you think that that will fly?
Well, I am a very loyal member of the party. Of course, I am educated enough to also be able to express independent views. If the president puts that through, through the governors, and it is accepted, certainly I will work, within that system to campaign for whoever, eventually emerges. But I want us to be warned that this year's election is not like the 2019 election. 2019 election was essentially a two-party affair. But this year, from what we are seeing, we are hearing of forces like Third Force, like, for instance, NNPP is coming up, Labour Party is coming up with a very strong candidate in, Peter Obi, and so on and so forth. So these, we must appreciate that actions would necessarily or naturally have consequences. I, as an individual, I'm just one person, and I have committed myself, to whatever the party comes up with. But we must also be, we must learn from our circumstances, we must learn from our environment, and know that it may not be as easy as we think, because, the society is, dynamic. We must also be warned now that the youths are coming up stronger and more agitated for change. If we just feel that because we have had the majority, I mean, it may not walk through in subsequent elections.
What do you mean by?
I just feel that we must be able to give the impression to the general public out there, and particularly the youths, that we have been fair to all aspirants, and that as Democrats, as progressives, we are not giving the impression that some people are being, over-pampered over and above all others.
Wow, it looks as if there's a lot more meaning into what you've just said. But so, what happens if, or why would there still be a lot of concern on your part if, because there are those who think, in the first place, you're the ruling party, your party is the ruling party. So whoever the party chooses, is it about the person or equally about the kind of machinery and the support the party will deploy to support the person. So in that, given that kind of consideration, would it matter who the person is?
Well, as an individual, again, I would say this. I have great concern for the development of this country. I think our emphasis should be on merit rather than just, the wish of our leaders. Capability is very important. Merit is very important. Antecedents, in terms of what the individuals have been able to do in the past are very important. And then the potential that the person is bringing, on board, so that people will be confident that we are not going to waste 4 years, next 4 years, just because our leaders prefer one over and above another. So my concern is that we should give the most positive impression to the general public. I mean, I know that in our party we're about, on the register, we are about 40-something million. But from past elections, we've now had a time that we had more than 20-something million voters. The youths who were not qualified to vote in previous elections are now qualified. Many of them are now qualified, and many of them are also well educated, that they know that there's power in their ability to acquire their PVCs and to be able to vote. So we should not just take things lightly and think that whatever we decide will go down well with the electorate. And the electorate, when I talk of the electorate, they're all over the country.
Well, let me ask Mr. Umar this next question. It would seem that the dust hasn't quite settled on the selection of former Vice President Atiku Abubakar as presidential candidate of your party, the PDP. Those who are calling for they saw this coming because the national chairman of your party had favored a northern candidate over any other interest over time. Is that something that is giving the system any concern, or is just one of those noises?
Well, if you have been following the activities of the PDP, you will have discovered that even before the choice of the national chairman, there were a lot of ups and downs as regards to Prince Uche Secondos, who was the former national chairman of the party, whose matter is still in court over his removal from that position. Now, the coming in of the new chairman was also greeted with a lot of complaints, because most northern aspirants who wanted to contest saw it as a move to actually placate them from contesting the elections. However, with the horse trading and everything that went through, it was agreed that, one, that the national chairman will resign if the candidate comes from the north. And of course, the national chairman is now, the candidate is now from the north. So at what point will the national chairman resign? Is it at this stage, the process of electioneering, or is it after the elections that he will now resign? These are the issues now that is agitating the minds of our party faithfuls. However, it is not about the resignation of the national chairman. It is about the process that has brought in the new, because the party at 3 different levels. The Bala Mohammed report, Senator Bala Mohammed has said the presidency should be left open. The Ebonyi report has said it should be left open. And finally, the Autumn report also said it should be left open. So there is no any fast and quick rule as to what will happen. It is very clear that the presidency was left open and everybody contested, and Atiku Abubakar won the election. And so, having won the election, you cannot have, for instance, within our party, which is a normal practice, a candidate or a president and a party chieftain. But perhaps because he's a candidate, he may be allowed to, the chairman may be allowed to take him through to the elections. Then after the elections, he will be, asked to resign, so that a southern party chairman will come into play.
Well, You know, we spoke with one of your party men yesterday who said that this is about the first time the PDP would throw open the candidature for the person to run as your party's flag bearer. Hitherto, it had been zoned to either one area or the other. The question here is, what informed the decision beyond the committee report? What reasons were those committees given for throwing it open as opposed to zoning, which was a historical practice of the PDP?
Well, let me state that the PDP had never had zoning in its own constitution until in 2017, when the Uche Secondos-led executives brought the issue of zoning to the National Convention, which was adopted, and it was part of the constitution. In Section 7 of our PDP constitution, that is where it gave room for zoning. Prior to that, there was no, it was a gentleman agreement. And this gentleman agreement has always been kept. Perhaps this time around, the power blocks from all sections of the country felt they needed to bring in their own different arguments as to why they should be the ones to take it. Why does the zoning, if there is any zoning, it should favor them. Where if there is no zoning, why they are the ones that are eminently qualified to contest the election. For the Southeast has brought an argument that they have been a sanctuary of the PDP. The PDP has always won in the Southeast, so they are, and they have never had it before, so it is their time to have it. The South have argued, for instance, that they only have done 5 years in the saddle, and so they needed to, up their ante and go further than that. The North Central has also argued that they have never had it as a democracy, and so they were also eminently qualified, and either to the Northeast. So the arguments have always been around this zoning is we have never had it, and now the matter has gone beyond the issue of zoning because there is also a tradition in the PDP. The tradition is that of the 16 years that the PDP had ruled the country, the North had only had it for 2 years during Eradua. And then the remaining periods were also done by Obasanjo and, of course, President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. So the North believes they have been shortchanged within the system, within the process, and so they were the ones that were eminently qualified. So that argument raged on, and some other dimensions were also brought in. For instance, there were arguments that the people who were coming back to contest had already left the party, and so by our constitution they were supposed to have lost seniority, and so they were not supposed to contest, they were not supposed to be given waivers, and so forth and so on. These arguments didn't succeed. So at the end of the day, the party decided, in greater consultation with stakeholders, that the ticket should be left open for every segment of the country to contest.
And apparently interest there will have been sacrificed. We'll look at interest where APC is concerned, and that's why I'm coming to you, Mr. Shitu. I'd like us to revisit the president's speech, paragraph 11 to be precise. And it says, I wish to assure you that the consultation process shall continue to ensure that all aspirants and stakeholders would be brought on board right through to the convention. This would also ensure that any anxiety occasioned by different factors are effectively brought under control and that our party emerges stronger. I'd like you to know what your reading of this is, particularly as it has to do with managing the interests that may emerge to be dissatisfied at the end of the day if what the president is saying is he wants to choose a successor, and as a result, it will be consensus.
Well, consensus, means consensus. Consensus implies that people are conceding. Consensus is different from imposition. Consensus is different from somebody recommending. If we really truly want to told the path of consensus, then we could simply get all the aspirants into a room, lock them up, give them 1 or 2 hours to choose one among them for, them to, bring out a consensus. That is what I know to be the true meaning of consensus. But from the practice of political parties in the past, I wonder, whether consensus has really been allowed to evolve, where, parties, people who are interested, within themselves or from among themselves decide to concede to one of them. Once there's no such altruistic, process of, some of the aspirants conceding to, one of them, then that cannot be consensus. So we have to be very careful as a party. I am saying all of these, out of, my true love for the party, true love for Nigeria, and the fact that I know that things are changing. A lot of paradigm is shifting here and there.
Let me come in there,
a lot
Mr.
more
Shitu.
people are getting interested in how candidates, evolve or how they emerge. And, if we don't handle it properly, we might have a problem. Particularly now we have, I would consider, a strong candidate in the newly elected, PDP presidential candidate. So
let me ask a more specific question. If consultations will continue right through to the convention, does it mean that the consensus has emerged before the consultation, or does it mean that the consensus will emerge and only be unveiled at the convention?
One of the leaders who are consulting or who are being consulted. So I wouldn't know the processes and the procedures to arrive at a consensus candidate. My own is for now to analyze and, remind us that, we must not assume that things will just happen, and that whatever we do, the public, the larger, electorate will not react one way or the other. So my prayer at this stage is that we get it right as a party so that we don't miss, particularly, I have said, I'm trying to repeat again, the factor of NNPP is there. Kwankwaso is making, some moves, and, we cannot ignore him. Peter Obi is also a candidate that we must, learn from, or we must be warned about. Not to talk of the PDP, which I have said again, and I'm going to say again, has a very strong presidential candidate.
It appears as though your party, you're really worried.
Ensure that
pardon me to just jump in and ask you.
Tackle all of these presidential
You've expressed a lot of concern. You're worried about your party getting it right. It looks as if PDP is giving you a headache in terms of how and who they have elected to be their flag bearer. We'll hear from PDP soon. But what if your party end up not choosing, say, for instance, Bola Tinubu?
Well, I'm just one individual, I must say. If I have my choice as an individual, I will look for the best that can tackle the presidential candidates of other parties. We must not pretend that things will just be a walkover. We will be deceiving ourselves as a party if we think that because we are in office now, whatever we do would have no consequence, either positively or negatively. When you are going to a war, you have to assess the, power, the potentials of your enemy. You don't go to war in a blindfolded. So to my mind, let our party throw the battle open like PDP has done. If they are our opponents, but we can also learn from them, one way or the other. They threw it open. We should also do the same. Then at the end of the day, if one person emerges from whichever part of this country, all those who have not gotten it would have some satisfaction that they have tried, they have done their best. It is the majority who had their own preference. But all this issue of consensus, from practice in the recent past, we don't use to get it right.
Won't that leave people feeling left out? Because you made that argument initially that it's a democracy, you should be participatory, etc., etc. But when a candidate eventually emerges through the process of a democratic process, so to speak, doesn't it leave people feeling left out?
Democracy would teach people, would let them know that, well, I have tried my best. The people, the electorate in this case, the delegates, decided to choose their preference. And so everybody will be satisfied because it's a democratic evolution.
If you look at what happened in the PDP, I mean, there is still plenty of talk and plenty of analysis as to what happened. A number of, let's say, a certain region of the country does feel hard done by, and it would seem that the candidate of the PDP now has a job of work on his hand. I mean, the major thing he said is that he is a unifier, yes. And he's taken that as a primary assignment within his own party already. So don't you think that you run the risk of leaving many people feeling disenchanted if the results do not go their way?
No, you see, the situation will be worse if people feel that I would have won but for the fact that somebody didn't give me an opportunity. Once the process is evolutionary, I believe the job of Atiku Abubakar is reduced because there was no, deliberate scheme to impose him on the party. There was an open election. We all saw it, the whole country, the whole world saw it. And the votes were counted, delegates from all over had opportunity of, but once it is in position, when it is so-called consensus, then the delegates' role becomes almost irrelevant, because, it's a fait accompli imposed on them. And then people will get disenchanted. And in fact, it will not just be individuals then. It will be people, sectional, groups who feel disenchanted, who feel we have not been allowed to, maybe we've been put down, we've been tied down, we've been alienated and all of that, schemed out and all of that. But once the process is democratic, whoever wins will be acceptable to the largest majority of delegates and of the country itself.
Let me come to you, Mr. Umar. You talked about how your party is now, is your party really considering asking the national chairman to resign?
Well, he actually made that pledge.
Okay.
When he was elected. He made the pledge himself. Nobody forced him to do it. He said he is aware of the enormity of the issues and that if a northern presidential candidate is elected, he would have no other option than to resign. Now, I have also said whether he will resign at this point or after the elections. That is what has not been actually defined. But the issue of him resigning, I think, is sacrosanct. The party must balance its own acts. The North and the South must be balanced. And that is how our party, if you take a look from Solomon La up to this moment, we have had a president from if we have a president from the North, then the chairman is from the South. That is how the party has gone.
Yeah, but looking at how, the conversation went within your party, the observations that have happened not just within your party, they've also happened outside of your party. Would you say that your party has taken into consideration the feeling of the general Nigeria, of the larger country? Because arguments on zoning were pretty strong, and your party does have zoning in its constitution, unlike the APC that doesn't have it in its own constitution. But beyond that, people say that it seems that there is a general understanding that when the North is done, it is now the turn of the South. Do you think that your party has considered that in terms of how the vote has swung with the candidacy of the PDP?
Our party cannot go outside our own constitution and begin to look for solutions nationally. We have a law guiding us as to how we should operate within our own party.
Yeah, but you have jettisoned zoning in your own constitution.
Yes, we jettisoned zoning because of the arguments I have given. I have given the arguments because the North is saying, no, you owe us. We have not done it. We only did 2 years, so we have not completed our period. Now the Southeast is saying, no, we have never done it before. The North Central is saying, we have never done it before. The Northeast is saying that, unless, of course, if you want to say Tafawa Balewa was democratically elected, which, of course, is parliamentary, we have not done it. So these various arguments, crystallize.
Yeah, but Tafawa Balewa was not in your party. This is talking about the generality.
Well, no, we are talking about the North.
Exactly, we're talking about the North in the entire history of Nigeria.
Yes.
If that is the situation, then we must also consider the tenure of President Muhammadu Buhari. You don't agree?
No, I don't agree, because President Muhammadu Buhari is of the APC. And the APC have their own constitution. And they are in their own constitution. They know how they have structured it, whether they have zoning or they don't have zoning in their own party.
But people argue that largely the reason why President Muhammadu Buhari won in 2015 and why an incumbent president lost was because the sentiments were pretty strong at the time that the North had not yet completed its tenure.
Yes, that is merely sentiments, but it does not still go beyond the confines of the interest and operations of a political
party. That's what I'm asking, if your party has also taken that larger consideration into, I mean, within the party, that sentiment did not hold sway, and the president, was elected as the candidate of the party, or was, whichever way he emerged as the candidate of the party. But when he was presented to the larger public, I mean, they decided whichever way they wanted. I mean, the sentiment, of course, came to play. So I'm asking whether your party has considered the larger sentiment of the bigger Nigeria before eventually saying that they would settle with Vice President Atiku Abubakar.
Okay, let me clarify an issue. Even where the sentiments at that time was for a northern candidate, the northern candidate could not have succeeded if there were no horse trading between the northern and the southern candidates. So without fusing the political parties, bringing a lot of interest groups together, and to realize that objective. And of course, within that process, there must have been horse trading as to, okay, we will support you, and then as in turn, when you finish, you will support us. Perhaps that is what would have happened within the APC. Now, within our own party, all these things must have been considered, because there were 3 committees, don't forget, and they will have sampled the opinion of a larger spectrum of Nigerians. The Bala Mohammed Committee could not have sat down and written a report in isolation of consultation. The Ebonyi Committee could not have sat down and written a report without consultations across the country. And of course, the Otom Committee could not have sat down, even though Otom himself is an advocate of a southern president. But he was the chairman of the panel. And the report is that the thing should be left open. So it must have been as a result of wider consultations.
Oh, well, I don't know. Zoning is not in your own arrangement.
No.
But still, the sentiments are there nonetheless. Do you think that your party, leaving it open, also has jeopardized the chances of whoever emerges? I mean, given the fact that now your party is thinking strongly of going down because the president made reference to an internal mechanism that has been put in place within the party, and is really concerned about giving it strong leadership. Do you think that it jeopardizes, I don't know the right word I'm looking for now, but the chances of fairness within the party?
Well, let me say this as a reminder to all Nigerians. When Buhari was chosen within APC in 2015, it was not because he came from the north. It was not because he's a Hausa man. It was not because he comes from Daura, but because on merit he was the one who merited being chosen. And he has done well within the last 7 years. By the grace of God, he has become a father of the nation. And we expect that by the grace of God, through the same process that he emerged, in 2015, we will have the emergence of another presidential candidate. So the issue that must be emphasized, let us use the same standards of merit, of integrity, of, nationalistic disposition, to provide a level playing field for current aspirants. Even in 2015, Buhari was not the only presidential aspirant. Kwankwaso was there, even Atiku was in the APC then. They all, competed. And then, the best of them, was elected. That is President Muhammad Buhari. So I am pleading, really, that we should allow the same yardstick of competition across the country, to prevail in choosing our presidential candidate so that we will have the best as judged by the generality of our party members from across the country. And then I believe if we do that, we will succeed. The fact that we unilaterally, if I may use the word, quote and unquote, choose somebody does not guarantee anything. Because this is a new Nigeria that we are in. And like I have said, new electorate are daily, being added to what we had, in the past.
The days ahead will certainly be interesting to see how the electorate finally welcomes the eventual candidates from your party and how they're welcoming the candidates from your party who has already emerged in the person of former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. But gentlemen, thank you so much for your analysis this morning. Mr. Adebayo Shitu is former Minister of Communications and member of the APC. Thank you so much for coming on. And Mr. Sani Umar is a former spokesperson, Presidential Campaign Council of the People's Democratic Party. Thank you also for coming on as well.
Thank you, Murphy.
We take a break at this point, but there are internal rumblings in certain parts of the PDP in some states. We'll be delving into one of the controversies after this break. Please stay with us. Well, indeed, the PDP presidential primaries might have come and gone, but not the controversies over the delegates who voted and the lists that were used. Well, we did mention while myself and Shemun were speaking on that day about how some delegates had written to say that, or some would-be delegates had written to say that there were no elections conducted in their own locality, and that the PDP was yet to, the Electoral Council of the PDP was yet to take a decision on that. Well, Ebonyi was one of those states where delegates emerged, but there was controversy over how they emerged because it would seem that the PDP is now factionalized. We have this morning two gentlemen, Mr. Okorafor Okorie, who heads one of the factions of the PDP in Ebonyi State. You're welcome to Sunrise City this morning.
Thank you. Point of correction. There's only one PDP in Ebonyi. There are no factions.
Okay, well, you will explain that to us in the process. We also have Mr. Abia Onyike, who is the former Commissioner for Information in Ebonyi State as well. You're welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much, Mape.
Well, you just heard his first statement, even though we hadn't gone into the conversation then. He says the PDP is not factionalized.
Yeah, we are praying that there should have been no factions.
Yes.
But some individuals and powerful people outside the state, including those at the National Secretariat of the party, are fomenting the crisis for their own selfish interest. And so the crisis so-called in PDP in Ebonyi State is not only a crisis of the party in the state, it reflects the crisis in the National Secretariat of the party.
There's a crisis in the National...
We'll get to that.
There is a crisis in the National Secretariat?
Why wouldn't there be?
To the best of our knowledge.
What is the administrative stability of the national body of the party? Are they not the one fomenting the crisis?
It doesn't seem that there's any crime. We haven't heard, just a moment. I mean, you say we'll get to that. We might as well get to it. As far as we know, the NWC of the PDP seems to be in order. There doesn't seem to be any crisis there. We know who the national chairman is, at least as at this moment. We know who the national secretary is. We know the publicity secretary. We know all of the people that we're currently dealing with as members.
But when they meet,
yes,
and they make resolutions, when it comes to implementation, one or two persons will start issuing test statements that would eventually contradict the policies and decisions of the party.
Can you give us an example?
What does that show?
Can you give us an example?
There was a statement that was issued by the party on the 27th of May, slating that there should be primaries in Ebonyi State. And when eventually the primaries took off, the National Publicity Secretary issued a test statement that the primaries were being cancelled, just as the process was starting.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, it turned out to be that there was no meeting of the National Working Committee cancelling the election.
Was that
So
not
that's what we are talking about.
Was that not because of the controversy already in Ebonyi locally? Because indeed, we see that there was a statement saying that after very extensive consultations, deliberations, and review of all issues, the National Working Committee of the PDP has approved the cancellation of all party primaries in Ebonyi State. It's only that of Ebonyi that seems to have been affected by this particular statement.
There is a particular statement dealing with Ebonyi, but were there no crisis in Anambra, in Imo, and in Abia, in the whole of the Southeast, and who is behind it?
Who is behind? Can you tell us who?
The person behind it is the National Secretary of the party. Yes, and he is also the one behind the performance of the delegates of the Southeast in the presidential primaries, because there were 95 delegates from the Southeast, and at the end of the day, only 15 voted for Southeast presidential aspirants, and 80 votes were traded off. Because the man was working for power brokers outside the Southeast geopolitical zone. He's not the first person to occupy that position. So why should he be fomenting the crisis in the states? And then you now want to blame the innocent party members at those places. So what does that mean? So let them put their acts in order. Let them meet, and anytime they meet and they make resolutions, those resolutions should be implemented by the organs of the party. So those have power to do that.
Can I ask
and not
you,
creating confusion all over the place.
Do you recognize Mr. Okori as your chairman?
He is not yet recognized as the chairman. Yes, the chairman who is operating right now is Mr. Silas Onu. He won the election last year during the Congress, but he was challenged in court. And on the 13th of April, a federal high court in Abuja here ruled that he did not win properly. And that Silas Onu was the person that was duly elected as the chairman. And then Silas Onu took over from him. Then later on, he himself now went to the Court of Appeal to seek stay of execution. And the Court of Appeal gave their stay of execution more than 1 month after Silas Onu had already assumed duty and started acting as the chairman. Okay? And that stay of execution was seen as being very, very belated. And the same national leadership secretariat of the party went to file a motion challenging that stay of execution because they had given a directive to their lawyer to go to court to withdraw the representation of the party as one of the joiners in that very case. Now, when that lawyer didn't do it now, they said, go and file a motion. And that motion is still pending. When the Court of Appeal started yesterday, the lawyer came and pretended that he was sick, that he is yet to react to the motion. And just based on that, the same National Secretary issued a statement that this man should resume duty. So what kind of confusion is emanating from the National Secretary headed by Senator Anyang? And what kind of human being is he? This is a man who presided over the convention and then the 80 votes.
I was just going to say that, perhaps we need to be, careful about mentioning people's names on the program, especially since they're not here to defend themselves. But it does seem that
he should be called to order. Otherwise, we'll be called for his resignation because it's not being fair to the states in the geopolitical, in this Southeast geopolitical zone. He's supposed to represent our interests. Though he is supporting a particular governorship aspirant in Ebonyi State, but that should not be the reason why he should not allow peace to reign in the state.
Let me come to you now, Mr. Onyike, Mr. Okori. You have heard how he has laid out some of the background to the troubles in the PDP in Ebonyi State. Are there parts of it that you disagree with?
Of course. Let me start by dissociating myself completely from Mr. Onyike's tirades against the person of distinguished Senator Sam Anyanwu, the National Secretary of the People's Democratic Party. I think that was in bad taste. Having said that, I want to say that I was validly elected. The Federal High Court in Abuja thought otherwise and gave judgment in favor of a certain barrister, Salas Ono, who contested with me and lost. On the same day of the judgment, the 13th day of April 2022, a motion for stay of execution was filed alongside the notice of appeal. Alongside the notice of appeal, on the 17th, precisely, records of the judgment were transmitted to the appeal court, effectively entering appeal. All right? And a few days afterwards, after the appeal, in fact, like up to 7 days, I can't remember the exact date, the National Secretariat of the party decided in their wisdom that they would obey the court, the Federal High Court judgment, notwithstanding the pending appeal. Not just notice of appeal, appeal was effectively entered and a motion of stay filed and served, duly served. And the National Legal Advisor, whom I respect very well, Ajibade Adeyemi SAN, counseled or advised in his office as an advisor that the party goes ahead to obey the judgment of the Federal High Court, notwithstanding that a proper notice of appeal, indeed appeal has been entered at this point, and motion of stay pending at this point. The rules of the Court of Appeal are very, very, very unambiguous in that case, because the rules say that when a motion for stay has been properly filed, no steps can be taken to enforce the judgment of the lower court. It is very, very, very express. And I can read it to you from my phone. It is rules of the Court of Appeal. The learned senior advocate, who is the national legal advisor of the party, discountenanced those and advised that the party should go ahead and obey the judgment, because in his own thinking and wisdom, the judgment was declaratory and not executory. Well, none of us here are lawyers. None of us here is a lawyer. All of us here are just ordinary people. However, I know that, like the name of each of those categories go, one is declaratory and the other one is executory. And the key part of that judgment was a directive to the party to issue, certificate of return to Barrister Silas Ono as a condition for swearing him in. Now, on the same day the judgment was delivered, before any action of the party, before even the enrolled order was signed, Silas Ono, did something purporting to have sworn himself in just to ambush the appeal. So many steps he took to ambush the appeal, but failed to get the party to issue him a certificate of return, which would have been the basis for the rest of. Now, I already admitted I'm not a lawyer. None of us is. So the details and all the legal things around those things, I will excuse myself completely from that. However, on the 23rd of the same April, the Court of Appeal, in a very detailed ruling, in a 24-page ruling, full judgment on the motion for stay, held that Silas Onu, in connivance with whoever, had made attempts to ambush the appeal and foist a fait accompli on the Court of Appeal, which they resisted, and went ahead to say that the appeal itself would have been rendered nugatory. In other words, useless. And what if the matter was actually credible, and it is very credible, and the whole thing turns. Now, assuming without considering...
are you saying, just a moment
yes.
now,
Okay.
it would seem that the Court of Appeal had a lot to say in granting stay of execution, but
yes.
it would seem that it was almost delving into the matter almost. But we'll take clarification on that when we come back from this break. Please stay with us. We're still dwelling on the controversy raised in the PDP in Ebonyi State, and we have with us Mr. Korafo Kuri, who is a factional chairman of the PDP. He's clarifying for us why he is the authentic chairman of the PDP right now in Ebonyi State, and we also have Mr. Abia Oyinke, who is a former commissioner for information in Ebonyi State. Well, just before we went on break, you were clarifying that the Court of Appeal did give a stay of execution, but the stay of execution looked like it was almost dwelling on the main matter as well. Is that what was in the stay of execution, which you said was 24 pages long?
No, they didn't go into the main issue.
Okay.
It was, well, in my opinion,
yes.
And this is a personal opinion, it had to take that long because of the plethora of actions, steps that have been taken and claims made, by Mr. Onu, all right? And they had to take everything bit by bit without ambiguity and completely demolished everything that had happened on points of law.
Okay.
Right, yeah, so, and went ahead to give a consequential order, which included returning to status quo ante. And curiously, Silas Onu, being a lawyer himself, went ahead and carried on like Court of Appeal is no court at all, and that he was not bound by the judgment of Court of Appeal. It was only yesterday that the party, after a National Working Committee meeting, resolved that I be recognized, and the letter was immediately made to INEC, recognizing me as the chairman of the party in the state, and that is why I insist that narrative be corrected. I am the chairman of the party in the state. There are no factions. And having said that, let me also address another point he raised about the primary. I think that in a situation where things are going wrong, you won't sit idly by and watch the studio burn without making calls here and there and say, what do we do in the circumstance? You will not wait for management meeting before you arrest an immediate situation. That is organizational management. So, not holding brief for anybody, because I'm not a member of the National Working Committee, but if no less a person than the National Publicity Secretary, the same man who issued a statement by which Silas Onu took over the party in the state, now comes round and says the party, after due consultation, the party decided to cancel an election. Is it for Mr. Onyike or anyone else to say, no, I will not stop the election? I must go ahead and conduct the election because the same party had had scheduled the election earlier. If the party scheduled the election and sensed that things were going wrong, should the party stand idly by and watch Ebonyi burn? Is that proper? Now, did the National Working Committee have to be called to decide whether election was going to go on or not before? Is it not enough? Does it not suffice for the national chairman, the national secretary, the national publicity secretary, the rest to be called and their opinion and consent obtained? Would Debo Ologunagba would have gone ahead? Would he have gone ahead to issue a statement without the authorization? Now, well, so the point being made, one second, that because the National Secretary has an interest that is supporting one of the governorship candidates and therefore is destabilizing, is very uncharitable, most uncharitable. On the contrary, and I must put this on record, what has destabilized Ebonyi PDP so far is the scramble for delegate votes, national delegate votes for the presidential primary. And I said that with every sense of responsibility. The contest, the scramble for the votes of Ebonyi, because whereas we have a candidate in Ebonyi, or we had a candidate in Ebonyi who was running for the presidential ticket, Sala Sono, Abia Onyike, and the rest of them had interest outside the state. And someone in the national headquarters who also had similar, their interests converged around a particular candidate, and they went about it with desperation, clear desperation.
Let me flip this now. I know that you want to respond to this, but let me quickly flip this conversation to Lagos before you respond.
All right, I think I might just, Mr. Onyike, so from what Mr. Okorie is saying is that your team appeared to be supporting Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, and so that's why you were scrambling for the delegates, and as such, that's why he thought that, or many thought that you were talking about the implication of those delegates on this particular election. So could you shed some light if there's any truth in what that suggestion is?
His own personal imagination. That is his personal imagination, but I gave you a concrete assertion that somebody at the National Secretariat, who is in charge of that secretariat, who was installed by Nwike, made sure that the 95 delegates coming from the Southeast could not vote for any of the Southeast aspirants. Only 15 of them did. So what happened to the other 80 votes? And it's just like the aphorism by Professor Ikenna Nzimiro, that in Nigeria, political parties are nothing but trading companies. So the trading off of the 80 votes should be questioned. It's not, you are talking about ourselves. In which way did that happen? Did the Anyimpa Anyim not get 14 votes? And there were only national delegates that voted from Ebonyi State. And we have 13 local governments. One delegate, one national delegate per local government. So if Anyim was able to get 14 votes, it goes to show that he had no problem.
No, but Mr. Onyike.
So, but then,
Mr. Onyike, just a minute. Respond to
this
before you proceed. I thought that your team equally said that the delegate list that they relied on to get that vote was not right, that it was an illegal list. That's all your team said.
The wrong delegate list, I agree, but they are Ebonians. So they voted for Anyimpa Anyim. So he's saying that there was a struggle on our own part to fight for somebody from outside the state as far as the play. I'm just hearing that for the very first time. But what we know is that there had been a very grand process of ensuring that delegates from the Southeast were traded off. And I'm telling you that these people who create instability in the running of the affairs of the party are the ones to be found culpable for that. And that's the destabilization that led to people like Pdp leaving. And now look at what he says. So I want to say that there was no reason for the National Secretariat of the party to cancel that primaries that took place in Ebonyi. And of course, the case is still in court. So I may not have to dwell so much on that for fear of contempt. Now, on the issue of the stay of execution that was granted to him, the other stay of execution came 1 month after. You cannot be staying the execution of an event that has already taken place, because you can only stop the execution of a process that is yet to be executed. But how come that other one come 1 month after? And after he came, a motion is pending at the Court of Appeal in order to interrogate that very stay of execution. But it has not been allowed to see the light of the day. And even within the mix of that process, the National Secretariat is coming again to issue another statement.
Okay, well, let me ask Mr. Okorie.
Recognized as the chairman.
Just 1 second, Mr. Onyike. Let me ask Mr. Okorie, you know, when you said something interesting the other time, and I'm just wondering, I mean, if you can give us some context to it. That statement from the PDP Secretariat says, after due consultations, the NWC approved. In other words, it wasn't an initiative of the NWC. It was proposed to the NWC, and the NWC ratified and approved it. First of all, who were the people that were consulted with when there is clearly another group of people who are also stakeholders as well?
Were the people who came to Ebonyi State to organize the primaries, were they not sent?
That's for Mr. Okorie, apologies. That's for Mr. Okorie. So, Mr. Onyike, just a second. That question is for Mr. Okorie.
To organize the primaries.
Hello, can you hear me?
Bottlenecks that,
it's from the question. Just a second, Mr. Onyike. That question is for Mr. Okorie, please.
Wait, I didn't get a question. Could you repeat yourself, please?
Okay. You said earlier, when you were, responding to one of the questions Mark asked you, you said statement came from the Secretariat saying after due consultations, the NWC approved the cancellation. That's what the statement says. So I'm just wondering 2 things. One, who were the people that were consulted with when the NWC may not have met, just as you said earlier? And then who initiated the idea that was approved, the idea of the cancellation that was approved by the NWC when there wasn't such a meeting? Who are these stakeholders or people that were consulted with before the decision was taken, when there is clearly a chairman that had been given, some form of approval?
Well, the statement, I believe, is right there before you, and you have read it, and I've read in between the lines. NWC approved. That is the operational statement there, if you ask me. And posing those questions to me, it's neither here nor there, because I'm not a member of the NWC. I wouldn't know who initiated what. I saw the statement the way you saw it, all right? Now, but what is important is that I don't think who initiated it and who didn't initiate it, is that NWC approved. And if NWC did not approve, the onus is on NWC to say, we did not approve. We did not approve. The query should go to the National Publicity Secretary who issued a statement. He should be queried if NWC did not approve. We all run organizations here. So the question as to who initiated and who were consulted and who were not consulted is not for me to answer.
Were you consulted, Mr. Okorie?
NWC approved.
Just 1 second.
And that approval was ratified yesterday in a proper meeting.
Just 1 second, Mr. Okorie.
Which is how I think...
Mr. Okorie, just a second. Were you consulted, or you just saw the statement like everybody else? Were you one of those people who were consulted?
No, I was not consulted. I was not consulted. I was not consulted. Why would I be consulted for a matter that is within the jurisdiction of the NWC? I'm not a member of the NWC. So I wasn't consulted.
Mr. Onyike, let me come to you. You said the aspirant from your state got 13 votes and it was okay. I would have thought that the aspirant is from your state and you would feel a more increased sense of patriotism. Why the disconnect between, that dismal number of votes for your aspirant?
No, I said that he got 14 votes on the whole, and that therefore the 13 national delegates from Ebonyi State who went there must have voted for him. But the aspirant, governorship aspirant in Ebonyi State, who is close to the national secretary, and all of them claim to be close to Anyim, didn't work hard. And they were the trading off of a whole 80 votes from the southeast. That's the point I am making Anyim to have only 14. So why did that happen? That is the probe, and Ohaneze Ndigbo may have to probe it and put people on stage.
Can I respond to this?
Go ahead.
I said earlier that the issue in Ebonyi was being stoked from outside, and it is the scramble for delegates' votes. And it was clear, it became very clear at the convention ground when, they insisted. Indeed, the national legal advisor, came very forcefully to stop the delegates from Ebonyi, because they had a different list of delegates who would have voted for a different person. So what Mr. Onyike is saying here is just merely patronizing Pius Anyim as though he cared about whether he won or didn't win. He didn't care. He doesn't care still, and that's the truth. That's the obvious truth, and that's very obvious from this conversation.
And that's why my next question is this.
They supported a different candidate. Thankfully, they did not succeed in subverting the will of the people of Ebonyi, all right, who voted the other set of delegates that eventually voted at the National Convention. Had it gone the other way, he wouldn't be saying what he's saying. That's the honest truth.
Well, and that's why my next question is this. Just a second, Mr. Corey.
Was being stoked.
Mr. Corey, just a second. Let me come in there. Mr. Onyike, that's why my next question is this. If you were so concerned that the problem, the 80 votes were traded off, are you also concerned that Mr. Anyim Pius had written to the party twice to complain that there was a problem with the delegates list, that it was manipulated? How concerned are you about that? Ahead of the primaries, he wrote to the party.
Delegates lists are not mechanically compiled. They have to be arrived at from a Congress. And it is the Congress that elects the delegates. For the state primaries, the 3-man delegates are elected in a Congress. And then for the National Convention, the 1-man national delegates are elected from the 13 local government areas. And that's the point we were making. So now these processes had taken place. And the party prevaricated. Even when they had published the list earlier on, it was clear that those who thought that they were favored were not favored, and they became very, very curious, especially when the primaries, were drawing nearer. As a result of the immediate cancellation of the other delegates that usually come from the wards, the statutory delegates. So there was tension everywhere because everything now had to be built around the 3-man delegates. And for the National Convention, the same. And therefore, what I am saying in effect is that Anyim Pius Anyim wrote, calling on the National Secretary to put his acts in order instead of prevaricating. And at the end of the day, what happened? We know how they came about with the list that they took to the National Convention. But that's not where we are concerned. The same National Secretariat had also argued that they were going to organize a new Congress to elect new 3-man delegates in Ebonyi. even after they had endorsed a previous one and published it. So who is to be blamed for all this confusion that they're creating? Is it the members of the party at the state level that are innocent and quiet? So they know what they're doing. They knew the reason behind the crisis they created all over the Southeast, which pushed up people like Obi and others.
So what's the way forward now? I mean, given the fact that the party has now recognized Mr. Okorie as the new chairman after the meeting yesterday, is there still confusion? Isn't it already all
They may
clear
be
now?
going for the Zamfaranization of the political process in Ebonyi. I don't know. I have nothing against
What
him.
do you
He's
mean
my
by
personal friend.
Zamfaranization?
The factionalization, they want to sustain it. The other man will not accept. He will also go to court to challenge that.
But right now, the governorship primaries have been cancelled. Isn't that correct?
That's very correct.
Well, it is still in court also. It's still being challenged. Because why should they cancel the primaries? What were the reasons they gave for that?
That falls within the purview of...
That falls within...
These
are the same people who said that we should go and reconcile the list of their delegates.
Just a moment. Okay.
Yeah. Neither you nor I has the competence, all right, or have the competence to question the decision of the National Working Committee to cancel. And let me say this: in an election, in a primary election, in PDP, I don't know about any other party, a 5-man panel is usually sent, a chairman, secretary, and 3 members. May Mr. Onyike tell us how many out of the 5 came to conduct the so-called primaries? I want response from him. How many out of the 5-man panel...
So are you saying that invalidates the process?
Did they say that?
I'm not. I'm just asking a question because there was no. Listen,
the national secretary.
The chairman and 2 others were not there, and the party actually knows why they were not there and what the intricacies. Excuse me. What the intricacies were that prompted them to stop the process.
So you will not be participating in the new polls if it does happen, the new primaries if it does happen?
Well, I cannot say I'm not an aspirant.
Well, so we have to thank you, gentlemen, for coming on the program this morning. We'll wait to see what eventually happens in Ebonyi, and we'll certainly keep our viewers updated on that. But thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. You certainly accept his position as the new chairman of Ebonyi in Ebonyi State.
Well, until he assumes duty now.
Until he doesn't have a choice.
Well, Mr. Okorie is the chairman of the PDP in Ebonyi State, and Mr. Abia Onyike is a former commissioner of the same part of former commissioner for information in Ebonyi State. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on. Let's see if we can quickly run through the mails and messages we have received this morning. This one is from Adenike. We're talking about Buhari's successor. She says, Nigeria should make up its mind on what type of government it wants to practice. We're definitely practicing theocracy. When leaders get imposed on us, either by buying their way or imposition, saying we are practicing democracy in Nigeria is just a waste of resources. Why were supposed contenders allowed to buy tickets for 100 million naira when Buhari wants to pick his successor?
Olagunju Oladele is just as concerned this morning, and he or she says, our political environment is defined by excuses. This often necessitates regional agitations for political power. These opportunities are usually determined by innate actions. To restrain a region from presidential power is to restrain national inclusiveness.
Professor Inakena says it's a travesty how the powerful bloc in APC and PDP, after zoning the national chairmanship position to the north, decided to circumvent the rule of governance of both parties by making the presidency open. This is disheveled and bedraggled towards disenchanted south. Here's a prof.
Well, Festus says, it is amazing that the 2 major parties didn't think it necessary to organize a national televised debate to give Nigerians opportunity to hear from the presidential aspirants via open exchange of ideas and opinions so that Nigerians can choose the best candidate. So There you go. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe in the future, you never can tell. But that's it today. We thank you all for watching. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Amaya Makinde, have a wonderful day.
We hope that future comes very soon, Chamberlain. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
And I'm Maokwe Ogun Yosef. Do have a beautiful day ahead.